Hey guys, let's talk about something important. Banks are closed over the weekend, but how come your card still works? Your MasterCard, your Visa, Amex, all of those cards, how come it still works? That's an important question. One of my customers asked me, okay, does it work over the weekend? I'm like, yep, our ring works over the weekend. So just to clarify, I'm Patrick. I'm the CEO of MoneySave, Orukka. So we do Orukka rings, which is effectively payment rings. You tap and you pay to go. So I talk to my customers daily, if not more, because I talk a lot really, and I'm there for my customers. So I'm on my route and flying, but I think it's really important to talk. So I have a few minutes. I was waiting for my flight, and I said, "What do I do?" Got two options: I watch Netflix. I could do a recording for my customers based on the last question I heard. So the last question in this case was, "Hey, how do cards work even when the bank is offline?" Which is important. So if your bank is offline, Saturday, weekend, or just closes down, would your card still work? The short answer is yes. And how? Okay, that's what we're going to discuss in this video. So, guys, you might recall, I think, guys, in the US, there was Silicon Valley Bank, which went down. Then there was Northern Trust, which is Northern Rock, sorry, in the UK, that went down. There's also quite a few banks in Greece as well that went down. And we know this around the world. Okay, so what happens when a bank goes down? Bank run. Okay, as they call it. Bank run means everyone's running to the bank to try and withdraw money at the same time. Clearly, the bank doesn't have enough cash just sitting there. Why? Because the bank actually is invested in long-term securities, long-dated securities that takes a while. And if they go ahead and sell it too quickly, they lose money. So the money is not going to be enough. So that's what usually happens. Again, banks can print money, borrow as much as possible, but they can also get in trouble if everybody rushes for the bank. And my favorite one, I think, is this one closest to me was Credit Suisse. So Credit Suisse, if anyone knows, in Switzerland, if you can't tell, Credit Suisse was one of the top banks here. In fact, I worked for them as well in terms of, I was a consultant for Credit Suisse in terms of setting up an SPV program. That's a structured purpose vehicle for the Swiss entity. And the idea was we saw this coming, unfortunately. And I was one of the consultants that was brought in to make sure that we can segregate the bank if something goes wrong. If this was about 4 or 5 years coming in, right? And I remember saying to them, hey, yes, we can. But I think the major point I saw then was the fact that, and everyone saw it as well, was the concentration on the investment banking experience or the investment banking clientele, which is big. Okay. And most of the CEOs really pushed the investment bank. And then the second to that was private wealth or private wealth management, which is big in Switzerland, right? But at the expense of retail, right? So retail, we're just left out. Retail is just you and I. Okay, well, we've got small deposits of 1,000, 5,000 deposits. But banks really don't care about that. They care about the big boys. If you're bringing in 10 million, they care about you. They want to bring you in, especially in Switzerland. So there's a lot of direct credit Swiss. But just so, if there's a story, right? People will say, hey, there's all the money in Switzerland. Oh my God, if you're a billionaire, they'll take you on and you save the bank. No. Otherwise, Credit Suisse will be here now. Yeah. So that's the truth. They lacked liquidity. They didn't have enough day-to-day customers. Yeah, and that's key. Free advice: if there's anyone there who is a CEO listening on this one, spend time with your customers. Don't throw away the small customers. Don't throw away the small boys. Okay, the small boy coming in with £10 today to invest in you or deposit or open up an account, accept that person. Okay, because you don't know where that person is going in your journey. So that happened a lot, still happens a lot in banking. If you want to test me here, show up to your bank with 1,000 and say you want to deposit, okay? Or you show up with 1 million and say, hey, I've got 1 million right now and I'm going to invest in the bank. Trust me, they're going to push all the small boys out and bring the 1 million customer in, which should not be the case. And banks really need to stop that. So that happened with Credit Suisse, A long rant into my Credit Suisse, a painful experience there, but that was gone. It was something I advised and cried all through until they went down. But the point I'm trying to make there is the fact that when that does happen, okay, people don't know for a while. So what happens then is, imagine, let's call one bank, say Citibank. Again, I'm not saying this is happening with Citibank. Please, guys, don't go on a bank run on Citibank. Imagine if Citibank went down, okay? No one would know that Citibank has gone down because if you have a debit card or credit card from Citibank, it would continue to work, okay? And it would continue to work for a while, okay? Because, there's something called STIP, standing processor. So a standing processor is someone like it usually happens in an open loop network. So in this case, if you look at a typical transaction, it's you showing up with a card that was issued by your bank. So that's two. Oh, wait, and then your bank is sending the card to MasterCard or Visa or JCB or Union Pay, depending on where you're at. That's three. Well, and then that goes then to the aggregator, Stripe, or whoever has issued that POS device. Four. Oh, wait a minute. Then it has to go to the coffee machine. Five. Or the coffee seller, whoever is selling, the merchant selling to you. Five. And then it goes to the merchant's bank, in this case, six. So there's six people on that chain where it goes on and on and on. And what happens in a split second. So the point I'm trying to make there is the fact that when that does happen, and there is it happens so quickly, but we have one person in the middle who would stand in and do that just to avoid that, where if for some reason they query your bank, this happens in 2 seconds, okay? So what happens then in 2 seconds, it needs to go from those five people, it needs to go from you to the issuer, from the issuer to the aggregator, from the aggregator to MasterCard. MasterCard then sends to the merchant then sends it down to the merchant's bank. Now that happens in split seconds, so that there's a query or a ping to say, does this guy have enough money? If the bank doesn't come back in a split second, MasterCard steps in there and stands in to protect that. Okay, mostly this is done by AI because they start looking at, okay, listen, does this guy have enough money? Is there enough money there? Is it a pattern that they will have enough money in the future? Is there a pattern that this is them actually spending the money? So there's a lot of AI decision that's there, which has been there, by the way, for years. It's just now that everyone's screaming AI. But AI has been in banking for quite a while, I'll tell you guys, especially the trading floor, the investment banking floor, the even reconciliations. A lot of things have been done by AI for a while. It's just becoming mainstream now because investors are involved. When investors are involved, there's always money. Yeah, and when there's money, there's always adverts and there's always noise. Then bubble comes in because more investors want to go in. But I digress. So the idea, I think, again, if you look at it, is the fact that when that happens, when they have five people and it needs to happen in a split second, one person in that chain, which is mostly MasterCard or Visa, steps in and says, hey, pass this payment through. And if that happens, then the payment goes through with no issues at all. And that's what's called STIP, standing processing. But it's important to know that your issuer, your bank, has to approve this. Your bank has to be part of this STIP program. Otherwise, it gets declined. So, like I said, I think the important thing is MasterCard, Visa, and all these guys step in and actually help. Okay. By the way, this doesn't apply to Amex. Amex don't have the standing process because Amex does everything in house. Yeah. So in this case, Amex, if you go to Amex, Amex gives you a card. So they're the card issuer. Then you go to a machine or a terminal that accepts Amex to pay. That vendor that accepts Amex is just accepting Amex internally. So within that loop is all internal loop. In that case, there's no need for a standing processor. The downside now becomes what happens if Amex goes down. If Amex goes down, or the server is down, or the actions are down, or anything I thought is wrong with Amex, that's gone. Your credit card doesn't work, which is different if you have an open loop, which is MasterCard, Visa, Union Pay, any of these guys. Those guys really have an open loop or agreement between them where they're standing and they help each other out at any point. If the server is down from your bank, they'll step in. That's the advantage of having a network. That's the advantage of why it makes sense to go with them because you know it's going to work in most places. And even if your server is down in the bank, you know MasterCard is going to help out there at that point and then come back to you and reconcile it in a few days later. Believe it or not, when you make a payment and it happens in a space of 2-3 seconds, that's the execution. So the payment has been executed. But on the other hand, the settlement doesn't happen until a few days later. So for us, when someone goes in and taps our card, yeah. So when you tap to make a payment with this card, you tap, boop, make a payment, and what happens? It gets paid immediately, 2 seconds. But and it shows on the app as well. So on the app, you see it immediately as well. That's fine. Those are executions. But we, for instance, the bank has to pay us. They don't pay us until 30 days later. That's because there's a reconciliation that happens between the banks, MasterCard, Visa, Amex, everybody reconciles. And then a few days later, they say, hey, this payment went from this ring. Here is your commission. Very small, guys. It's like a penny, like really small. But the important thing is that comes in days later. It'd be like your adverts as well on YouTube. You have a YouTube ad, and a few months later it comes on, or a few weeks, later you get paid because they go through a loop where they check with the advert, see your performance, see the impact on their advert numbers as well before coming back to you. They don't just pay you. Okay. And that's the advantage, right? But I think the important thing there is this is why it works. And this is why you should use your MasterCard, Visa versus your Amex, because if they go down, which is most likely, it could just be IT issue. It could just be a server being down. It could be a cyber attack, which happens a lot these days. If that happens and the app is down, you want to make sure that there's a standing processor which comes in to MasterCard in this case, and make sure your bank is subscribed as well. Because there are a few banks that don't actually agree to this, right? They're like, nope, we don't want to do it. We do it ourselves internally. The downside now becomes if their server goes down or crashes, which happens a lot these days on banking side, then you're stuck and you're stranded. But in that case, if you're going to have some advice, get multiple banks, sorry, and get multiple accounts. Because in that case, if one goes down, you whip out the other one and use it. There's no loyalty, and then query your bank later. Okay. So that's the advantage there. Again, just to repeat, standing processor means, STIP means when your bank is down, a MasterCard or Visa can come in, step in, and actually approve the transaction on behalf of your bank so that a transaction goes through. Take care, guys, and thanks for joining us on this one. And I wish us a safe journey. I think my plane is almost leaving, so I'll make sure I go in and catch the flight now. Take care, bye.